10 Ruthless American Outlaws You've Never Heard of. Welcome to Creepshow, where we delve into the grim tales of crime, terror, and true horror from history's darkest recesses. Today, we're bringing you the forgotten stories of ruthless American outlaws who once terrorized the land as highwaymen, robbing travelers, ambushing stagecoaches, and leaving an eerie legacy that history has nearly erased. Join us as we count down the 10 most lethal and mysterious American outlaws you've probably never heard of. Number 10. The Doane Brothers. In the chaos of post-revolution America, 5 brothers from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, left an unforgettable mark on history. Moses, Levi, Joseph, Aaron, and Mahan Doane, once devout Quakers, grew up in a family known for its commitment to peace and modest living. Yet, the pressures and tragedies of the American Revolutionary War forever altered their path, transforming the Doanes from peace-loving Quakers to some of the most notorious highwaymen of the 18th century. The Doanes were staunch loyalists during the war, siding with the British Crown in a time and place where such allegiance was dangerous. Their family paid a steep price. The Patriots confiscated their land and home, leaving them with nothing. Rather than bowing to this loss, the brothers sought vengeance on the Patriots, setting aside their religious principles and turning to a life of violent crime that would haunt Pennsylvania for years. Starting in 1781, the Doanes launched their crime spree across eastern Pennsylvania, targeting wealthy Patriot landowners and government stores. Operating with a gang of about 30 men, they became known for their highly coordinated attacks and unmatched skill at evading authorities. Known as skilled horsemen, they would often escape across the border to New Jersey or find refuge in the woods, where they knew the terrain well. To the locals, their ability to evade capture became legendary, earning them a Robin Hood-like reputation among some. Their most famous heist took place in 1781 when the Doanes raided the Newtown treasury. With precision, they broke in, stole Waller 307, a fortune in those days, and disappeared before anyone could respond. The robbery sent shockwaves through Pennsylvania, with residents fearing the Doanes were unstoppable. Officials scrambled to catch them, issuing bounties and organizing pursuit parties. But the brothers' uncanny knack for slipping away stymied every effort. Eventually, the Patriot forces began a relentless crackdown, and by 1788, the Doanes' luck ran out. Moses Doane, the charismatic leader and most feared of the brothers, was shot and killed during a shootout with local authorities. Levi and cousin Abraham were captured, tried for their crimes, and hanged in Philadelphia in a highly publicized execution. As for the remaining brothers, their fates remain shrouded in mystery. Mahan reportedly escaped to England, while Aaron and Joseph are believed to have fled to Canada, where they vanished from historical record. The Doane brothers left behind a complex legacy. While many viewed them as villains, robbing and killing without remorse, others considered them symbols of defiance against the new American government. Their story is one of personal vengeance transformed into a near-mythical crime spree, reminding us of the blurred line between heroism and infamy in the lawless days of post-revolutionary America. Number 9. Ben Cool. On December 5, 1916, outside the tiny mining town of Jarbidge, Nevada, history was made in blood and gold. The last recorded horse-drawn stagecoach robbery in the United States took place on a cold desert day when Fred Searcy, a driver for the first-class mail stage, was found dead, shot execution-style in the back of the head. The crime was meticulously planned, but it wasn't just Searcy's life that was taken that day. $4,000 in gold coins was stolen, never to be recovered. The people of Jarbidge, shaken and desperate for answers, noticed something unusual near the crime scene: a black overcoat and a bloody envelope. The coat was recognized almost immediately by townsfolk as belonging to Ben Cool, a known troublemaker and drifter who had a criminal record and was no stranger to skirting the law. Suspicion mounted, and Cool was soon tracked down and arrested, along with 3 of his associates. One of his friends, hoping for leniency, testified against him, revealing details of the plan and the heist. The investigation and trial that followed Cool's arrest made legal history. Among the evidence presented was the bloody envelope, which bore a partial palm print, a significant find because this was the first time in American legal history that a palm print was entered as evidence in court. Forensic experts matched the bloody palm print to Cool, and this groundbreaking forensic evidence, combined with the testimonies from townsfolk and witnesses, helped seal his fate. Ben Cool was convicted of murder and sentenced to death, but his sentence was eventually commuted to life in prison. He served years behind bars, a bitter reminder of a failed attempt to escape his drifter's life with stolen gold. In April 1943, after more than 2 decades in prison, he was released at the age of 61, his health failing due to tuberculosis. He died only a year later, marking a quiet end to the man who played a central role in America's last horse-drawn stage robbery. The legacy of Ben Cool and the garbage robbery endures not only as a piece of Wild West history, but also as a landmark in forensic science. It serves as a reminder of how the closing chapters of the American frontier era still held tales of violence, lawlessness, and the relentless push for justice in even the most remote corners of the country. Number 8. Joseph Thompson Hare. In 1790, a young Joseph Hare set out from Pennsylvania on a journey south to New Orleans, unaware that he would become one of the most feared highwaymen in early American history. Along the way, he encountered 3 other like-minded criminals, forming a gang united by their ruthless and murderous tendencies. Their crimes went far beyond simple theft. Their methods were gruesome, and their appearances were designed to terrify. The men smeared their faces with dark berry juice, creating a blood-red mask that turned them into nightmarish figures, guaranteed to strike fear into anyone who crossed their path. Traveling through the rural frontiers, the gang targeted peddlers, farmers, and travelers, robbing and killing without remorse. They traded goods with local Native American tribes and used counterfeit passports to avoid authorities. However, their luck eventually ran out in Spanish-held territories, where they were caught and imprisoned as suspected American spies. Surprisingly, the Spaniards released the men early, allowing Hare and his associates to resume their lawless ways. But this journey began to take a psychological toll on Hare. Haunted by hallucinations and ghostly visions, he would later claim that he once saw a magnificent white horse appear before him, a spectral vision that stopped him in his tracks. This vision proved pivotal, as it delayed him long enough for a pursuing vigilante posse to catch up and capture him. Hare was sentenced to 5 years in prison, his first taste of justice. Upon his release, Hare proclaimed himself a changed man, but his reformation was short-lived. Within a year, Hare was back to his old ways, participating in a violent robbery of a Baltimore night mail coach. The crime sealed his fate. In September 1818, Hare was sentenced to hang for his crimes. On September 10th, he was led to the gallows in front of a crowd of 1,500 onlookers, his life of violence and terror ending with the swing of the rope. Joseph Thompson. Hare's story is one of betrayal, violence, and haunting visions, a twisted tale from early American history. While his crimes have faded from public memory, his story lives on as a chilling reminder of how some men, even after glimpsing redemption, remain bound to a life of darkness and terror. Number 7. Michael Martin. In 1816, a 20-year-old Irishman named Michael Martin found himself in a tavern in Ireland, where he met an infamous figure known only as Captain Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt, a notorious highwayman, saw potential in the young Martin, who possessed an impressive skill that could come in handy. He was a remarkably fast runner. Thunderbolt took him on as a protégé, giving him the moniker Captain Lightfoot, and the two soon formed an unlikely partnership that would leave a trail of daring robberies across Ireland, Scotland, and England. Armed with brass pistols, Thunderbolt and Lightfoot began targeting wealthy travelers on the highways. Yet, their brand of crime had a code of honor. They never robbed women or the poor, preferring instead to take from the wealthy, a chivalrous touch that earned them a certain mystique. The duo's audacious heists became legendary across the British Isles, but fate eventually took them down different paths. Thunderbolt and Lightfoot parted ways when Martin set out for the United States, leaving his mentor behind forever. Upon arriving in America, Martin wasted no time resuming his life of crime. He traveled up and down the East Coast, robbing unsuspecting victims with the same boldness he had shown overseas. His career as a highwayman continued successfully until he targeted a prominent Boston figure, Major Bray, and his wife. During the robbery, Martin made off with 12ish, modest by today's standards, but enough to land him in serious trouble. Authorities quickly pursued him, and he was captured not long after. While in prison, Martin launched a bold and vicious attack on a jailer, seizing the moment to escape into the countryside. He remained at large for a short while, but his freedom was fleeting. Authorities eventually tracked him down in Springfield, Massachusetts, where he was recaptured and brought back to face justice. In 1821, Michael Martin was sentenced to hang for his crimes. He would go down in history as the first and last person to be executed in Massachusetts for highway robbery. Martin's story, with its colorful characters, daring escapes, and tragic end, is a reminder of the romanticized yet brutal life of highwaymen in the early 19th century. His life reflects the thrill and danger of that era, but it also underscores the harsh justice awaiting those who chose a life of crime. Captain Lightfoot's legacy may be forgotten by many, but his tale still echoes as one of the final chapters in the long and tumultuous history of highwaymen. Number 6. James Ford. James Ford led a life that at first glance seemed nothing short of exemplary. Known for his service to the community, Ford held numerous respected positions: Tennessee delegate, county sheriff, justice of the peace, captain of the Livingston County Cavalry, and even overseer of the poor. But Ford's public reputation was nothing more than a carefully maintained facade. Beneath his respectable titles lay a dark, ruthless criminal known to locals as Satan's Ferryman. Ford's shadowy double life unfolded on the infamous Cave-in Rock waters, where he operated as a skilled ferryman, running a ferry across the treacherous riverways. Ford used his position as a legitimate businessman to mask his criminal empire, which was far more sinister. Ford was the mastermind behind Ford's Ferry Gang, a feared band of river pirates who preyed upon the unsuspecting travelers and merchants who used his ferry service. The Ford's Ferry Gang became infamous for their brutal tactics, targeting travelers as they crossed the wilderness trails and river routes of Kentucky, Tennessee, and Illinois. Ford's gang used his ferry as a lure, enticing people to trust the well-known ferry operator. But once they boarded Ford's ferry, many would fall victim to robbery and murder. Travelers, traders, and even entire families vanished after stepping aboard, leaving behind no trace but the chilling reputation of Satan's Ferryman. Ford's operation also extended to counterfeiting. He used his gang to distribute fake currency, furthering his reach and profit. By the 1820s, Ford's name was synonymous with fear along the riverways, and his gang's influence was pervasive. His position and connections protected him from the law for years, and authorities largely turned a blind eye to the grim rumors surrounding him. However, his immunity wouldn't last forever. In 1833, after nearly a decade of unchecked violence, a group of vigilantes had finally had enough of Ford's reign of terror. The identities of these vigilantes remain unknown, but they organized to take justice into their own hands. One fateful night, Ford was ambushed and assassinated, bringing an abrupt end to his gang's violent rule. With Ford's death, the Ford's Ferry Gang quickly dissolved, unable to sustain its operations without their brutal leader. His murder remains a mystery to this day, but the vigilante group's actions ensured that Ford's decade-long legacy of bloodshed and terror would come to an end. James Ford's tale serves as a haunting reminder that even those who wear the guise of respectability can hide monstrous secrets. His story, layered with deception, power, and violence, underscores the hidden darkness that lurked within the early American frontier. Ford's name may have faded from history, but for those who traveled the cave-in-rock waters, his legend as Satan's ferryman endures as one of the most sinister figures of the era. Number 5. The Potts Inn. After the violent end of James Ford, known as Satan's ferryman, the river routes and trails remained treacherous for travelers. But rather than blatant robbery, travelers were met with a more insidious threat. In Potts Springs, just off the Ford's Ferry High Water Road, stood the Potts Inn, a seemingly welcoming establishment run by Isaiah and Polly Potts, a married couple who offered food, lodging, and a place of rest for the weary. The Potts Inn attracted those who journeyed along the river, or who had taken Ford's notorious ferry. Travelers could stop for a meal, a drink, or a room for the night. But for some, this stop would be their last. Underneath its quaint facade, the Potts Inn was a place of death, where hospitality was merely a ruse to lure victims into the murderous trap of Isaiah and Polly. The couple had devised a chilling operation. After gaining the trust of their guests, the Potts would murder them in the dead of night, disposing of the bodies in shallow graves around the property. The couple's brutality extended beyond just those who stayed the night. Travelers who happened upon the inn's tavern, or merely passed by, were not safe from the Potts' grasp. It was common for individuals to be attacked and murdered along the trail leading to the inn, and as word of these disappearances spread, Potts Inn gained a sinister reputation. Locals whispered of travelers who were welcomed at the inn only to vanish without a trace. In a dark twist of fate, the Potts' alleged brutality would come full circle with a story that continues to haunt the legend of the Potts Inn. It is said that one day their long-lost son, Billy, returned home after years of separation. Neither parent nor son recognized each other, and as Billy unknowingly entered the inn, he met the same grisly fate as countless others before him. According to local lore, Billy fell victim to his parents' murderous scheme, only to be buried among the anonymous graves that surrounded the property. The Potts Inn and its blood-soaked history left a lasting mark on the region, becoming a part of local folklore and legend. Isaiah and Polly Potts, though eventually gone from the historical record, remain emblematic of the deadly lure that awaited travelers along the lawless frontier. The chilling tale of Potts Inn serves as a reminder that even the most unassuming places could hide horrors beyond imagination, where home was the last place any weary traveler would ever see. Number 4. David Lewis. David Lewis, a man of many identities, led a life as tumultuous as it was criminal. At 17, he joined the army, only to become a deserter soon after. For his desertion, the military sentenced him to death. But in a dramatic twist, Lewis managed to escape his fate, breaking free from his ball and chain and beginning his life as a fugitive. Lewis's next chapter took him to Vermont, where he entered the dangerous world of counterfeiting, a lucrative yet high-risk trade. His illegal endeavors led to another stint in prison, but he escaped once more, this time with the help of Melinda, who would later become his wife and accomplice. Together they began a new chapter at the Doubling Gap Hotel in Pennsylvania, which became Lewis's base of operations. From here, Lewis set his sights on a series of high-profile robberies. He targeted the wealthy, earning himself the nickname the Robin Hood of Pennsylvania. But while legends suggest he may have occasionally given to the poor, Lewis's true motives were profit and survival. His primary targets were wealthy travelers passing through town, especially those transporting valuables and large sums of money. With Melinda by his side, he orchestrated daring highway robberies along the wagons that carried goods and riches through the forests of Pennsylvania. However, Lewis's reign as an outlaw couldn't last forever. After one of his heists turned violent, he was wounded in a skirmish with authorities and captured. His injuries quickly worsened, and infection set in, leaving him in severe pain and unable to recover. Gangrene spread through his wounds, sealing his fate, and he died in jail in 1820. David Lewis, known as Pennsylvania's Robin Hood, became a legend in the region, remembered for his life of crime, escape artistry, and relentless defiance of authority. Though he was often romanticized for his occasional generosity, Lewis's story is one of risk, rebellion, and the inevitable toll of a life outside the law. Number 3. Henry Plumber. Henry Plumber is a name remembered for his dramatic transformation from respected lawman to ruthless criminal mastermind. In 1856, Plumber was elected sheriff of Nevada City, California, and served 2 terms, gaining a reputation for law enforcement. However, beneath this respectable facade lay a darker nature. After killing his mistress's husband, Plumber was convicted of second-degree murder and sent to San Quentin prison. Surprisingly, after serving only 6 months, he was pardoned by the governor and returned to Nevada City, where he was soon elected assistant marshal. But his law enforcement career didn't keep him on the straight and narrow. After killing another man during a brawl in a whorehouse, he fled California in 1861 to avoid prosecution. Plumber eventually resurfaced in Idaho, where he fell in with a gang of highwaymen. Under Plumber's influence, the gang grew in power and audacity, calling themselves the Innocents. This gang targeted traveling miners in search of fortune, preying on their gold and valuables. As their reputation for robbery and murder spread, Plumber's ambitions only grew. In 1863, Plumber moved with his gang to Bannack, Montana, where, incredibly, he was elected sheriff once again. But this time, his role as lawman was simply a cover for his criminal empire. Plumber turned Bannack's law enforcement into a tool for organized crime, using his position to plan and execute the gang's crimes with chilling efficiency. He provided his gang members with critical information on gold shipments, protected their operations, and directed them on which miners to target. While publicly upholding the law privately, he orchestrated a wave of crime and terror, allowing the innocents to rob and murder without fear of reprisal. Over time, however, the townsfolk of Bannack and nearby Virginia City began to piece together the truth. They suspected that the escalating violence and thefts were connected to Plumber himself. After more than 100 locals had been killed or robbed, the settlers could no longer ignore the pattern of crime under Plumber's tenure. In January 1864, nearly 2,000 vigilantes took matters into their own hands. They stormed the town, capturing Plumber and several of his men. Plumber, pleading for his life and weeping, was ultimately hanged on the very gallows he had intended for others. Henry Plummer's downfall was swift and brutal, marking the end of his dual life as a sheriff and outlaw. His story serves as a powerful reminder of the thin line between law and lawlessness on the American frontier. Plummer's rise and fall demonstrate how even the highest offices of law enforcement can become the breeding ground for the darkest of criminal enterprises. Number 2. Samuel Mason. Samuel Mason was a notorious highwayman and river pirate who used the Ohio River near the Illinois-Kentucky border as the base for his ruthless operations in the late 18th century. In 1797, Mason set up camp at Cave in Rock, a natural hideout that had become infamous as a haven for outlaws and pirates alike. Here, Mason crafted his sinister enterprise, luring unsuspecting travelers to their deaths and earning a place as one of the most feared criminals of his time. Mason's operation was both clever and cruel. He posted a sign near the cave that read, "Liquor Vault and House of Entertainment," a ruse designed to draw travelers seeking food, drink, or respite along the dangerous frontier. Once ashore, the travelers fell into a carefully constructed trap. Mason's gang, waiting in the shadows, would ambush the unsuspecting visitors, stripping them of valuables before brutally murdering them. Adding to the deception, Mason even hired beautiful women to pose as stranded damsels, enticing passing boats to approach the shore. The unlucky souls who took the bait would find themselves in a deadly ambush. Mason's gang disposed of bodies with cold precision. The corpses were gutted and filled with rocks to ensure they would sink to the bottom of the Ohio River, erasing any trace of the gruesome encounters. The valuables collected from victims were then transported to New Orleans, where Mason's associates sold them, turning the death of countless innocents into profit. The law eventually caught up with Mason and his gang in 1803, when they were detained by Spanish authorities for crimes committed along the river. However, their captivity was short-lived. En route to Tennessee, Mason and his gang staged a violent escape, killing their transport commander and fleeing into the wild once again. This act of defiance placed an even larger bounty on Mason's head, sparking increased interest from bounty hunters and even his own affiliates. In a chilling twist of betrayal, one of Mason's most trusted associates, a man known as Little Harp, saw the bounty as too tempting to ignore. In July 1803, Little Harp turned against Mason, killing him and decapitating him to claim the reward. He brought Mason's severed head to the authorities in Mississippi, securing the payment and ending the violent reign of one of the most ruthless highwaymen in American history. Samuel Mason's legacy is one of deception, violence, and betrayal. His life as a river pirate and gang leader showed the dark depths of crime along America's early frontiers, where even the most trusted allies could turn on each other for the right price. His story serves as a brutal reminder of the treacherous world of outlaws, where loyalty was fleeting and life was expendable. Number 1. The Harp Brothers. Micajah Big Harp and Wiley Little Harp are often regarded as America's first true serial killers, known for their horrifying brutality across Kentucky and Tennessee. The Harp Brothers' murderous spree began in the late 18th century, but unlike other outlaws, they didn't kill for profit. They killed for pleasure. Their crimes were so heinous that even hardened criminals at the infamous outlaw haven, Cave-in Rock, found the brothers' lust for murder intolerable, eventually driving them out. The Harps' methods were gruesome, with reports of torture, disembowelment, and brutal disfigurement. They targeted men, women, and children alike, showing no discrimination in age, gender, or race. For the Harps, murder was sport, and they left a wake of mutilated bodies wherever they went. Estimates of their victim count range between 25 and 50, though the true number may never be known. Unlike most criminals of their time, who were driven by financial motives, the Harps seemed motivated purely by a thirst for violence, making them one of the most terrifying duos in frontier history. Big Harp's end came in 1799 when he was tracked down by a posse led by a man seeking justice for the murder of his wife. In the final confrontation, Big Harp was mortally wounded by a tomahawk and died shortly after. To serve as a warning, his captors decapitated him and placed his head on a tree stump, where it remained for nearly a decade, a grim marker known as Harp's Head along the road to Henderson, Kentucky. Little Harp managed to escape capture and fled, eventually joining the infamous gang of Samuel Mason. In a fittingly treacherous twist, Little Harp would ultimately turn against Mason, beheading him to claim a bounty. He arrived in town carrying Mason's severed head, hoping to collect the reward, but his crimes were well known, and officials immediately recognized him. Little Harp was arrested, tried, and hanged in 1804, putting an end to the Harp Brothers' terrifying legacy. The Harp Brothers left an indelible mark on American frontier folklore, embodying an era where lawlessness reigned and fear lurked around every turn. Their story is a haunting reminder of the dark extremes humanity can reach, especially in times and places where society's rules have yet to take hold. Thanks for watching Creepshow. If these stories of forgotten highwaymen gave you chills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more tales from the darkest corners of history. Stay curious, stay cautious, and we'll see you in the next episode.